you drive about 2 hours east of the nearest city, past the wide-open plains and the rolling hills, you'll find my family's ranch, a stubborn little patch of land that's been here for over 120 years, longer than most folks around here have been alive. It's not big by Texas standards, but it's mine, passed down from my great-grandfather to my grandfather, to my father, and now, finally, to me. The main house is an old 2-story with wraparound porches and creaky floorboards that sing with every step. Out back, the barns lean a little from the constant battering of the wind, but they stand strong. Everything on this land, every fence post, every oak tree, feels stitched into the fabric of who I am. It's not just a property, it's a legacy. Life out here is simple. Neighbors are spread out, but we all know each other by name. When something happens, good or bad, word travels faster than wildfire. It's the kind of place where folks wave when they pass by, even if they don't know you. Privacy isn't a luxury, it's a way of life. And for a long time, that life was peaceful, predictable. The ranch was my retreat from the noise of the world, a place where the only interruptions came from a curious deer wandering too close to the fence or the occasional rattler sunning itself on the porch. But peace has a funny way of drawing the wrong kind of attention. It started on a Saturday morning. I was out by the barn fixing a busted hinge on one of the gates when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I looked up, expecting one of the neighbors. Instead, a sleek black SUV rolled up the drive like it owned the place. Out stepped a woman, in heels far too fancy for dirt roads, strutting across my yard with a clipboard in hand and sunglasses perched high on her nose. She didn't introduce herself, didn't ask permission. She just looked around like she was inspecting the place, frowning at the porch, tilting her head at the barn like she was mentally remodeling it. It was the first time I'd ever laid eyes on her, and even then, something deep in my gut told me this woman was going to be a problem. I wiped the grease from my hands on an old rag and walked toward her, doing my best to keep my face neutral. Out here, you learn early that flying off the handle never solves much. Besides, maybe she was just lost. Maybe. Before I could say a word, she lowered her sunglasses and gave me a once-over, the kind that made it clear she didn't think much of what she saw. She stuck out a manicured hand like she was doing me a favor. "Cynthia Harrow," she announced, flashing a dazzling white smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm with Harrow Realty. You must be the caretaker." "Caretaker?" I raised an eyebrow but took her hand briefly, mostly out of habit. "I'm the owner," I said, slow and clear. Her smile faltered for half a second, then came back twice as bright. "Oh, of course, naturally. Well, good news. I'm here to finalize some details with you. I just closed on this property last week. Paperwork's all but wrapped up." She tapped her clipboard meaningfully, as if it held the truth of the universe. For a second, I thought she was joking. Maybe it was some weird promotional gimmick, one of those "we're buying your house" scams you hear about. But her expression didn't crack. I let out a short laugh. "Ma'am, you must be mistaken. This ranch isn't for sale. Hasn't been. Won't be." Cynthia tilted her head the way you might when explaining something simple to a stubborn child. No, you don't understand. There was a deal. The previous," she paused, searching for the right word, "interested party agreed. I represent the new owners, which is, well, me. So I'll need you to vacate within the month." I stared at her, sure I was being pranked. Maybe a neighbor set this up as a joke? Hidden cameras somewhere? I glanced around but saw nothing but the endless stretch of pasture and sky. "I don't know what kind of paperwork you think you have," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But this land's been in my family for generations. There's no sale, no deal, and you're trespassing. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Her lips thinned into a tight, displeased line. She adjusted her sunglasses and gave a little shrug, as if none of this was surprising, just disappointing. "Well," she said coolly, "this isn't the last you'll hear from me. You're going to find I'm very persistent." Without another word, she spun on her heel, kicking up dust with her fancy shoes as she stalked back to her SUV. She climbed in, slammed the door, and roared off down the drive, leaving a cloud of grit and confusion hanging in the air behind her. I stood there for a long minute, rag dangling in one hand, heart thudding heavier than it should have. Something told me this wasn't over, not by a long shot. For a few days after that first encounter, I told myself it was over. She'd had her little delusion, gotten embarrassed, and moved on. That's what made sense. That's what sane people would do. But Cynthia Harrow didn't. Move on. It started small, almost laughable. I found a bright red for sale sign staked at the end of my driveway one morning. Harrow Realty. Historic ranch property. Inquire within. It fluttered in the wind like a middle finger aimed straight at me. I yanked it out and tossed it behind the barn, thinking that would be the end of it. The next day, there were 3 more. One at the mailbox, one near the front gate, and one shamelessly planted by the barn. Then came the people. On a bright Saturday morning, a couple drove up in a shiny silver pickup, parking right in the middle of the field like they owned the place. I was out by the porch with my coffee when they approached, grinning like they'd found the deal of the century. "Is the owner around?" the man asked. "We heard there's an open house today." It took everything in me not to spit out my coffee. "Who told you that?" "The realtor, Cynthia something. She said it's first come, first served. Make an offer today. And we could close by next month." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I sent them on their way, politely because it wasn't their fault, and called the sheriff. Deputy Ross showed up an hour later. Good man. Known him since high school. He shook his head when I told him what happened. "She's not supposed to be here without your permission," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "I'll have a word with her. Might just be some kind of misunderstanding." But it wasn't. That night, I set up some trail cams around the property, just in case. A week later, the real violation came. I found the side door to my main barn swinging wide open. Inside, Cynthia had set up a full-blown viewing. String lights hung across the rafters, tables with cheap brochures showing future development plans, and a small crowd of well-dressed strangers sipping wine like they were at an art gallery. Schatzer, my land. I could barely see straight. I marched in, demanded they leave, and when Cynthia came over all flustered, waving some nonsense papers at me, I didn't even pretend to be polite anymore. "This is trespassing," I barked, loud enough to rattle the barn walls. "I'm calling the law." She didn't even blink, just smiled sweetly and said, "You're making a scene in front of potential investors. Think about your future." I called Deputy Ross again. This time, he issued her a formal warning and told her to stay off the property or face arrest. I thought, maybe that would slow her down. I thought wrong. Within days, the harassment doubled. More people, more signs, more fake listings popping up online. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a coordinated campaign to bully me off my own land. And if Cynthia Harrow thought I was the kind of man to be scared off, she had no idea who she was dealing with. After the barn incident, I realized I couldn't just sit back and hope the law would take care of it. Cynthia wasn't going to quit. She was playing some kind of long game. And if I didn't figure out the rules, I was going to lose. So I did what any stubborn old rancher would do when backed into a corner. I started digging. First stop was the county clerk's office. I spent an afternoon combing through property records, deeds, and sale listings. The ladies behind the counter knew me by name. They even brought me coffee while I flipped through dusty binders and scrolled through slow-loading databases. Nothing showed any legitimate sale of my ranch. Nothing pending, nothing filed. Legally, I still owned every square inch free and clear. But Cynthia wasn't just stupid. She was slick. A few towns over, there was chatter about a scandal involving another property. An old bed and breakfast that had mysteriously changed hands overnight. I paid a visit to the owner, a wiry, no-nonsense woman named Fran. Fran didn't mince words. "That witch tried to steal my place too," she said, lighting a cigarette with a trembling hand. "Claimed I agreed to sell at some ridiculous price. Even had fake contracts. Took me 6 months and thousands in legal fees to clean up the mess. Sounded familiar. Turns out Cynthia's game was simple and dirty. Find vulnerable properties, old ranches, run-down estates, family heirlooms. Claimed there was a deal in place. Forge or manipulate documents just enough to look official. Bank on the fact that most people would be too overwhelmed, scared, or broke to fight her. Push them until they settled, handing over the property. For a fraction of its real value just to make her go away. A quiet little real estate heist, one desperate family at a time. The more I uncovered, the clearer the picture became. She wasn't just trying to intimidate me into leaving. She was orchestrating a hostile takeover. And the worst part? If I hadn't known better, if I had been a little older, a little sicker, a little more trusting, I might have fallen for it. Back at the ranch, I started connecting dots. The fake buyers showing up, the open house without permission, the online listings. She wasn't just harassing me. She was creating a narrative that my ranch was already sold, that I was the squatter refusing to leave. It made my blood boil. Not just for me, but for everyone else she'd conned. For the families who'd built their lives on land just like mine, only to watch it stolen out from under them by a woman with a fake smile and a sharp pen. But I wasn't like the others. I had time. I had fight left in me. And if Cynthia thought she could push me into a corner and come out clean, she was about to learn exactly how bad she'd miscalculated. Finding out her scheme didn't make me feel better. If anything, it set my nerves on a razor's edge. Knowing you're under attack is one thing. Proving it, making it undeniable, that's where the real fight is won. So I started planning. First step, surveillance. I installed hidden cameras all over the property, some up high in the trees, others tucked inside birdhouses, even a few disguised along the fence posts. Anywhere she might trespass, there'd be eyes waiting for her. I spent a few late nights wiring everything to a private cloud server. Nothing local she could find and smash if she got suspicious. Second step, make it official. I had my lawyer draft a cease and desist order, notarized and hand-delivered. Certified mail too, so she couldn't claim ignorance later. The language was clear. Set 1 foot on my land again, and she'd be facing felony charges. But I wasn't naive enough to think a piece of paper would stop her. No, Cynthia needed to walk right into her own trap, and she needed to do it on camera. That's where my buddy Jason came in. Jason's the kind of friend who doesn't ask questions, just shows up with a six-pack and a bad idea when you need him most. I pitched him the plan over coffee. He'd pose as an interested buyer, play dumb, act eager, get Cynthia talking, get her showing off, all while the cameras rolled. He loved it. We set it up for a Saturday morning. Jason pulled up in a rental car, dressed like some big city investor. Shiny boots, aviators, fake Rolex glinting in the sun. He parked at the property line just inside, the section where Cynthia had been planting her illegal for sale signs. Sure enough, not 30 minutes later, Cynthia's black SUV appeared like a vulture circling fresh meat. She bounced out of the driver's seat, all smiles and handshakes, launching into a sales pitch before Jason could even introduce himself. "You're lucky you caught me today," she chirped. "This property is going to go fast. Perfect for a boutique vineyard or luxury cabins." Very hot right now, Jason played his part perfectly. "Could I see the barns, maybe the pasture out back?" "Of course," she beamed. "Follow me." And just like that, she unlocked the barn, the one clearly posted with private property, no trespassing signs, and led him inside. She showed him the equipment, walked him through the stables, described, in nauseating detail, how easy it would be to demolish the old structures and modernize the land. Every illegal, damning word caught in full HD from 3 separate angles. I watched from a live feed in my truck, heart hammering. Against my ribs. This was it, proof. After a while, Jason asked about the title and paperwork. Cynthia waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, I've got all that taken care of," she lied breezily. "The current occupant is just a technicality. He's old, stubborn. It'll all be wrapped up in a few weeks. You'll be able to move in without any drama." Old. Stubborn. She wasn't wrong, but she was about to find out just how dangerous old and stubborn could be. Jason thanked her, shook her hand, and promised to get the financing together. She bought it hook, line, and sinker. By the end of the day, I had over 4 hours of footage showing Cynthia trespassing, breaking, and entering, and attempting to sell property she didn't own. I called my lawyer that night. "Don't release anything yet," he said, voice tight with excitement. "Not until we gather everything. Make it overwhelming, unbreakable, then we go nuclear." So that's what I did. For the next week, I laid low. Let Cynthia keep digging herself deeper. More fake listings popped up. More tours arranged behind my back. Every move she made, every lie she told, captured and cataloged. She thought she was building a case against me. She didn't realize she was laying the foundation for her own downfall. And when it was time to strike, I'd make damn sure there'd be no way for her to slither free. I thought I had seen the worst of Cynthia Harrow. Thought maybe if I stayed sharp, played it smart, I'd outlast her. But nothing prepared me for what I found that morning. It was just after sunrise when I saddled up my old quarter horse, Boone, and set out to check the north pasture. From a distance, something looked off. I pushed Boone into a trot, a knot of dread tightening in my gut. When I got closer, the breath punched clean out of my chest. The grove, a cluster of century-old oaks that had stood since my great-granddaddies. Time was gone. Gone, stumps raw and weeping sap jutted up from the earth like gravestones. Piles of hacked limbs and splintered trunks lay scattered like a battlefield. The trees I used to climb as a boy, where my dad carved our initials into the bark, where my granddad proposed to my grandma under the summer stars, all reduced to wreckage overnight. I swung down from Boone, boots sinking into the churned-up mud, and just stood there for a moment. Silent. Stunned, broken inside, and then the rage hit. Not quiet, simmering anger like before. No. This was white-hot, blinding fury, roaring through my veins like a wildfire. I stalked the perimeter, hard-hammering, finding more of her dirty work. The fences along the west side, the ones separating my land from the county road, had been cut clean through. Wire coils dangled uselessly from snapped posts. Wide gaps yawned open, making the land look wild, abandoned, available. Exactly what Cynthia needed to convince buyers the property was up for grabs. She hadn't just trespassed this time. She hadn't just lied or harassed. She had desecrated something sacred, and word traveled fast. By noon, half the neighborhood had heard about it. Trucks started pulling up to the house. Neighbors climbing out, faces grim. Old Joe Ferguson from the cattle farm next door. The Perkins brothers. Miss Luann from down the way, her apron still dusted with flour. Folks who normally kept to themselves. They came because they understood. This wasn't just an attack on me. It was an attack on all of us. On the history, the blood, the sweat poured into this land across generations. Joe shook his head, jaw tight. "This ain't business no more," he said. "It's personal." Miss Luann wiped tears from her cheeks with the edge of her apron. Those trees, they were landmarks. History. She had no right. I nodded, swallowing the lump burning in my throat. "No more warnings," I said. "No more hoping she'll back off." The cameras I'd hidden caught everything. Every chainsaw, every fence cutter, every grinning face she brought along to clear the land. Evidence, proof. And now, a whole town full of witnesses ready to back me up. I wasn't just fighting for my home anymore. I was fighting for the soul of the land itself, and I swore standing there among the broken stumps and ruined fences that she was going to regret ever setting foot on my ranch. Cynthia Harrow thought she was untouchable, thought her designer suits, her fake smiles, and her mountain of cash could shield her forever. She was dead wrong. 2 days after the destruction of the Grove, I called up my cousin Mark, a tech-savvy guy who worked in media, and handed him the security footage. Hours of it. Every second of her crimes crystal clear. Chainsaws roaring through old oak trunks, fence cutters snapping century-old posts like toothpicks, Cynthia herself laughing and bragging about how the old fool would never know what hit him. Mark edited it into a tight, brutal 3-minute video, set it to a slow, somber country ballad, added captions spelling out the crimes in bold red letters. Then we hit send. First stop, the local news station. Now in a sleepy town like ours, real estate scams and land feuds don't just make the news, they become the news. The anchor, Lisa Crowley, practically salivated when she saw the footage. "We've been getting complaints about that woman," she said, leaning in. "But no one's ever had proof, until now." That night, the 6 o'clock news ran the footage in full. No censorship, no softening, just Cynthia Harrow in living color, chainsawing her way straight into public disgrace. The phones at Channel 7 blew up. Within hours, neighbors, clients, former clients, and old rivals were calling in with their own horror stories about her. Meanwhile, I uploaded the video to social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Mark knew exactly how to tag it for maximum. Reachmo Chainsaw Karen, Hoey from Hell, land grabber exposed. By the next morning it was viral. Hundreds of shares, thousands of comments. People who had never even heard of our town were weighing in. "Hope she gets sued into the next century. Protect your landowners. Shame on her. Chainsaw Karen strikes again." And the memes. Oh, the memes. Someone photoshopped Cynthia's face onto a chainsaw-wielding horror movie poster. Another had her riding a bulldozer with the caption, "Coming for your backyard, one illegal sale at a time." It wasn't just jokes, though. I made sure of that. I sent the footage, along with a carefully written report, directly to the State Real Estate Commission. Attached evidence of her forging documents, falsifying property listings, and, of course, good old-fashioned trespassing and vandalism. The commission moved fast. 3 days after my submission, they launched an official investigation. Cynthia's real estate license was immediately suspended pending review. 2 weeks later, after overwhelming evidence poured in, not just from me, but from half a dozen other landowners she had tried to bully, her license was permanently revoked. They slapped her with massive fines, too, enough to bleed her dry. And that wasn't the end of it. I filed a civil lawsuit for property damages, emotional distress, and loss of historical landmarks. The neighbors joined a class action suit of their own. By the time the lawyers were done stacking the paperwork, Cynthia Harrow was looking at a financial ruin that not even her deep pockets could escape. And everywhere she went, there was no escaping the public shaming. At the grocery store, people pointed and whispered. At church, entire pews shifted away from her like she carried the plague. Local kids started a TikTok trend where they staged mock property invasions, dressed as Cynthia, fake chainsaws and all. Her once proud company, Harrow Realty, shuttered its office windows within a month. For sale signs with her logo were spray-painted with fraud and beware of scammer. She couldn't walk 5 feet without seeing a reminder of what she had done, and how completely she had lost. It wasn't just justice, it was righteous, glorious, unstoppable karma crashing down on her, faster and harder than any of us could have dreamed. For the first time in months, I slept with both eyes closed. The land was safe, the trees were gone, but their memory would be honored. And Cynthia Harrow, she was nothing but a cautionary tale now. It took a full year to restore. The ranch, we replanted trees, not the towering oaks that once stood for centuries, no. That kind of grandeur only comes with time. But we planted saplings strong and stubborn, with roots that would one day reach just as deep. The old fence lines were rebuilt too, one post at a time. Handcrafted the way my grandfather had once done, with rough cedar and thick wire that could hold back cattle or coyotes alike. The scars of Cynthia Harrow's rampage didn't disappear overnight. But with every nail driven, every seed planted, every plank hammered into place, something stronger grew in their place. A community stitched tighter together by the fight we had endured. Cynthia, for her part, slithered away under the weight of her disgrace. Rumor had it she sold her mansion at a loss and moved 3 counties over, trying to reinvent herself among strangers who didn't know her face. But the internet has a long memory, and so does a reputation shattered that publicly. Wherever she went, she'd always carry the stain of what she'd done. Back here at home, something beautiful happened. The town council passed new ordinances, protecting historic properties. Old ranches, heirloom gardens, family cemeteries, all designated as landmarks now. If you wanted to so much as trim a branch off a century-old tree, you needed town approval first. Neighbors who barely spoke, before now organized monthly gatherings to check on one another's land. Preservation committees sprang up. Kids were taught in school about the value of our history, not just in textbooks but in living, breathing places like my ranch. I walk the property most evenings now, the soft crunch of gravel under my boots, the golden hush of dusk settling over the fields. The new trees sway in the breeze, tiny and defiant. Sometimes there's still an ache when I pass the stump of what once was, a reminder of the battles fought and what was lost. But mostly there's pride, because we stood our ground. Because we said not here, not this land, not our story. And because when someone tried to erase the past for their own gain, we made damn sure the future would remember. The ranch is safe, the community is stronger, and the roots, old and new, run deeper than ever.